Bueno, me vine acá a Motorino, a una pizzería que me recomendaron recién en la calle, que dije, a ver dónde puedo comer una buena pizza. Pero eso es la previa, bueno, vamos a ir ahora al Limited to One, a entrevistar a Kristian, el dueño, que tiene una disquería que es impresionante, que tiene la particularidad, es básicamente tener muchas ediciones limitadas o una copia de repente, una variación específica de algún vinilo, que el tipo tiene ese disco y no tiene otra copia. Entonces, en general, algunos de los precios de repente se van un poco más para arriba. Mucho hardcore, mucho punk, mucho emo, algunas cosas de indie, alternativa. Así que nos vamos para ahí, vamos a ver qué nos podemos llevar, qué podemos llegar a encontrar, pero sobre todo a entender un poco cuál es la filosofía detrás de la disquería. Así que esto que vamos a ver ahora es un poco el recorrido de Limited to One y una entrevista con Kristian.
One of the things I think that make the store pretty special is that it's run by someone who cares a lot about records. I'm a big collector myself. I have a huge record collection. When I started thinking about opening up the shop, I asked myself, like, every time I go to a shop, what is it missing? What would I be really psyched to see in a store? You know, for a while, it's like every time I traveled, I would go somewhere and they would have a used section, but it was mostly the same records over and over. And I asked them if they had used modern music or current music, and they would say no, or very little. And that was frustrating. So I was like, what if we had a store that just focused on the hard to find stuff? That would be super cool. How about every time you go to a store and you don't know what pressing it is and it's sealed and you're like, what is this? I don't want to buy it. Go home and it's the wrong one. Or if they have it closed off and you can't see what the condition of the record is. That's really frustrating. So, I just tried to brainstorm with me and my record friends, what would be the best thing, and we I came up with the idea of the OB strip where it has the name, the condition, the pressing info. And, a lot of records don't even have the title of the artist on it. You know what I mean? Look, can you tell me who this is? No. You know what I mean? I know it's Boris because I know who it is. You know what I mean? But most people don't. Maybe they're looking for their first Boris record. They would pass that by in a second. Now, if I wrote up in the right-hand corner, Boris, now people know immediately. Right there, that's a huge red flag for me when I go to a store. It's I don't know what records these are. It'll take me an extra half hour just to look at all the records, to really look at it. So number one, that was a thing. I wanted to approach it just from a practical collector's point of view. Yes. I wanted to make it fun for people who collect. Sure, there will be some starter stuff here. There are cheap records here. It's not everything's expensive, But we don't do dollar records. We don't have the same shit all the time, I have a pretty serious rule that if something's on the wall for too long, I'll try to sell for a half price or something. I don't want anything to stick around too long. It's not a museum. You don't go to see things on the wall, forever. Yeah. So that's another thing. I don't like things to sit around. I want new stuff to come in. From the beginning, I realized that social media was going to play a part in the store, and I didn't realize how big it was going to be. But from before we even opened, I started an account and I started teasing all the records that we would have. And the first 2 or 3 records were Seisha, You and I, all this early Screamo stuff without me even thinking about it, because that's stuff I love, And then there was Engine Down and Promise Ring and all this stuff that I cared about. I know we talked about this off camera, but if you're in that little zone, in that scene, you think that if there's a small amount of people who care about this stuff. If you went to see Lifetime the first time before they reunited, the place wouldn't be packed. There'd be 30 people there. You would see Saves a Day or Engine Down, there wouldn't be anyone there, because, and then in our mind, we think not that many people care about that stuff. And when I started the shop, I was I can't just focus on that stuff, but it's going to be a specialty of ours. And then I quickly realized that there was more people who were into that than I realized. And it was not just New York, and it wasn't just the US, and it, it ended up being from around the world. And I didn't realize, you think about it, but you don't realize that there is a scene outside, or at least a small sect of people who care about that stuff. And I quickly found out that people do, and there is a very rabid fan base. And to have someone who is into it You know, I've met so many people from that era, like who played in bands, who had distros, who are just fans. You know, we totally like, we'll go back and talk, they'll sell records, we'll discuss old stuff that hasn't been pressed, you know, whatever it may be. Like, and it very quickly became a community in and around the store. You know, anyone who grew up, or anyone who's in New York and grew up listening to that music, quickly realized that I was going to have that stuff in the shop. So they would come more often, you know? And I'm here 5 out of the 6 days we're open. So when you come here, you're going to end up talking with me. You know, like I try to give people space, but if people want to talk about music, I talk about music all the time anyway. So like to talk about it over records is even more fun, makes it a better place to be. And people come in and teach me all the time, you know, well, tell me about bands I hadn't heard of. There's been a lot of like younger people coming in the store who are interested in this music, which is really fascinating to me. Like 18-year-olds who are just getting into like screamo and early emo stuff. And like, I love that. Like that, it's so exciting to me, which means that there's gonna be more new music. So we try to be involved in that also, you know, by like helping put out new bands and doing store exclusives with labels putting new music out, not just represses of older stuff. Honestly, I was just like a music person. You know, since I was a kid, I just like always obsessed about something. There was always like a band that I was listening to nonstop, and it was like I would go to shows with my friends. That's what we'd do. Hang out, like whatever during the week, but we try to go see as many shows as we could.
Always here in New York. Right?
Well, I started in New Jersey, and when I was 19, I went to California. And while I was in California, I went to film school. This is really interesting. I went to film school, but I did 2 internships, and both internships were with music. They were music related because I kind of knew that I couldn't make a living doing music really, but it was always a passion of mine. So like I wanted to still be involved in music. One of my internships was at like a radio station, that indie like alternative
college
music.
Radio.
Yeah. But it was a big station. It was like it wasn't college radio, but they played a lot of college music radio, right. You know, and the other one was Fat Rec. So I did my internship at Fat Records. So like, I mean, I tell people all the time, I didn't have like the best experience there, but it was more just about, I was too young. I didn't really understand the dynamic of like, it was very cliquey, you know, like lots of cliques of
and it's
people.
A family business.
Exactly, yeah. And it wasn't like, and I was just an intern. I wasn't a very good internship. I really just wanted to be there to be close to the music, kind of. So while I was in San Francisco, I went to see a lot of music. I moved back to New York in 99, so pretty early. And like the day I moved to New York, I remember looking in the Village Voice, and that night it was like Rye Coalition, Blue Tip, and another band, and I was like, holy shit, I'm gonna love it here. You know, like literally the day I moved here, there was like an amazing show happening, you know? That was it for like the first 10 years in New York. I went to see shows. I worked in film, but I always went to see shows. I collected CDs like everyone else, but I did have a record player, and I collected a lot of singles. So I had a lot of like early singles. Like like every time I'd see the Promise Ring, like buy a single, you know, or whatever, because it was always cheaper. And when you're younger, you move a lot, you know, and you don't want to carry like 1,000 records everywhere, you know. So I like would have like 3 boxes of singles, you know. It wasn't until like maybe 15 years ago, maybe, when I started like heavily collecting LPs again. I had a few. I had like Elliott Smith. I had some stuff that I had found pretty early on, some No Effects, you know, but I really went hard at the collecting. There was one store in New York called Sound and Fury, and they were in the Lower East Side. They were around like 99 to 2003 or something like that. Maybe, yeah, I had those years off, but I love that store. It's very much like this shop. They were very friendly. They knew me. They knew my taste. I would come in, they'd be like, hey, Kristian, here's the new stuff on this label that you love. You know, they kind of like knew what I liked. So there was that aspect. And they also had like shows play there. Like they had At the Drive-In play their shop, and it was smaller than this shop. Like I was like, you know, if I ever open a store, it'd be something like that. You know, that feels very like community based. You know, they would host shows, which we started getting into recently, you know, and it was just like, there was a little bit of that there too, that like made me who I was as a collector. But like I never played music. I had a lot of friends in bands, but not really. I did non-speaking casting for film and TV. Like, I did all the extras for John Wick 2 and 3. Like, I worked on The Americans. I worked on, like, a bunch of different shows. And then I would do speaking roles for commercials. So I would audition people for commercials. But I was freelance for almost 15 years, and it kind of drove me nuts. Like, I never had a stable paycheck. One time I worked on 4 shows at the same time with just me and my business partner. It was too much. I had my first panic attack ever. You know what I mean? Like, and I would never have that happen before. So I knew I was getting like too stressed out about it. So I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna take a break. And I opened up the shop, and I was gonna do both for a while, but then eventually I just like let go of the film stuff.
So you're saying basically that opening a record store won't give you any stress?
Yes, no stress at all. I mean, it really depends on when you open it, I think. You know, I definitely got lucky in the fact that, like, I saw the resurgence happening early on. I knew that was happening, you know, because I was part of it. Like, I saw that people were getting back into records, you know, like, I was at the first 3 record store days. I would stay out all night. Like, I was there, like, I probably was at the first 5 of them. First in line every time, you know? I mean, all my friends at least. And I would meet new friends, like, in the line. We did a podcast about vinyl for a while, too. And that was leading up to me opening up the store. You know, I think if we didn't do the podcast and I didn't do all that stuff, I wouldn't have opened up the shop, but I saw an opportunity. And I wanted to give back to the neighborhood because I'd lived in this neighborhood for so long, too. There are parts of it that are really difficult, you know, but there are parts that are at play that I have no control over. You know, like, I feel like if the economy is doing well, the store seems to do pretty well. We're so niche in what we do that it's hard to, like, advertise for us. I can't tell somebody's parents what I do and make it sound special. I don't know if it's as easy to just say, like, oh, we specialize in hard to find stuff. It doesn't make as much sense until you're here. Our aesthetic plays into it a lot. We like to keep everything really clean and pretty. It's a record store that you go in and you say, oh, it smells nice in here. You know, they're like, that never happens, you know, like, but that's important to us. It's difficult to maintain and just, like, always making sure I have good records in the store, paying my bills and all that stuff, because, you know, it is a lot of, like, inventory coming in and out. I think if the store was a little larger, actually, I think it would be easier for me, believe it or not, because we have had a lot of opportunities where, like, I've had TV shows approach us to shoot here, but then they come here and it's too small, and they're like, and that they pay, like, really great money, you know, and I'm sure if that happened more often, it would make life a little easier on us. So I bet you if the store was bigger, that would be a little easier, but bigger store, more records I need to...
More storage space.
Exactly, yeah. They see that, like, I'm not coming into it as a complete newcomer. It's authentic because I've been a fan of all these bands for years. So I think that's one of the reasons why they feel like it's cool to, like, interact and be a part of it, because they know that, like, I'm not just a fan, but I'm, like, a peer, that I've been, like, doing this as long as they have. Not the same thing, but, you know, you see someone that's similar, somewhere near your age, and you know that, like, they probably went to the same amount of shows as you did, and you probably did the same things, you know, so there was a lot of that going around, I think. Someone like Dennis from Refused, like, I was a huge Refused fan. Like, they were one of my favorite bands for years. Shape of Punk to Come is still, like, one of my top 5 records of all time. Totally loved it. Dennis and I have mutual friends. Like, I almost saw them on the tour that they broke up on the first time in, like, the 90s. I missed them by, like, a week or 2. They broke up, like, before they got to where I was living. You know, for us to talk, we're like, you know, we're around the same age. You know, we've been, like, listening to the same music for a long time. Dennis is a collector. I'm a collector, you know? So I think people see that also. And they also, like, other places, realize that, like, if you want to have a conversation with your fans or your customers, if you do it through a store that people genuinely and authentically like, then they know that they can talk to me, and that's like talking to the people who really like their music. It's the same thing. Before I opened the store, I went to the Fest in Gainesville, you know? Yeah. Arrow's Aim used to be down there, a really great punk store. Like, I had started a pile, like, of hundreds of dollars of records behind the counter. And I'd go back there and there were 2 piles. It was me and then Evan from Into It Over It. Like, we were buying the same exact amount of records. Like, we were
and
both...
You kind of look alike.
Yeah, maybe we're similar. And we're both from New Jersey, too, you know? But you know what I mean? Like, that was before, and I met Evan that trip, You know, like I'm friendly with him before I even had a store because of that reason, because we're nerds, you know, like I bought from Jeremy before I owned a store because I was buying records off a Discog. Like, yeah, there's definitely that acquaintance easily, you know?
Yeah, the community.
Yeah, the record community, not even just the music community, but the vinyl community itself, you know? I still will always think about it. I mean, you know, for me, the punk ideal is more of just sort of like a way of like living on how to think about things. I think of it as like look at everything from like outside the box sort of thing and see if there's another way to do it without having to involve people that don't need to be involved and to do things yourself. I went to art school and punk, like they're both sort of a lot of the same ideal system as sort of like attacking things a little differently. But when it comes to like, I mean, we're still capitalists. The thing is I 100% try to keep it as fair as possible. That's all. I'll be honest with people and say like, I bought this for 100. Like I'm only making $20 on it or something like that. Like sometimes I'll get stuff just to put in the store because I think it's cool, but I'm not really making a lot of money. You know, I'm not going to get rich off of selling records. And I don't think it would behoove me to put a record in the store like for 3 times of what it's going for flipping records. Like it's not worth it. My reputation would be at stake if I was like ripping people off. So I just choose not to do it, you know? So I'm like aware of sort of like
the conversation.
Yeah. But there's sometimes where people like, you know, it gets like splitting hairs at times. People forget I am a business, you know, I'm not like just giving records away. If somebody sells me a record for X amount of dollars, I still need to make money off of it. Sometimes I've bought records and realized that like the going rate isn't much more than that. And I try to like, I mean, there are times where I've lost money just because I don't want to charge more than I can on it. If a record is going for $100 online, the most I would ever charge is like $105, you know, like just to cover shipping, just so people can have it in their hands and hold it. But for the most part, like I don't sell online for that, like that reason mostly is I don't want to have to, you know, I like people coming in and taking a look at records and being able to see what the condition is and all that stuff. So. I mean, it is interesting to see a lot of like the younger people who come into the store who are in bands that are putting out really good music right now. So, I mean, there are a lot of like little different scenes that are happening that are really great. I don't know if we have like an emerging scene that's going to take over like a grunge or something like that, you know? But I think that like, as far as like the independent music scene, I think it's pretty striving. There's a lot of good labels and bands coming out right now. Stuff that I like. I mean, we had a band play the shop a year and a half ago and they're like now opening up for Death Cab. Like that's a huge jump, like within a year and a half. There is a lot of really good music and there's a lot of good venues, you know, like everything helps each other. You have the labels, you have the venues, you have a record store. You know, if we all sort of help each other, we can kind of push the music out there so other people get to hear it, you know? So, I mean, we're healthy. I'll tell you that much, you know? Healthy enough, at least, you know? We're surviving. I have to give it a little listen to it, but I think I might actually lean a little bit more towards the Baltimore record. It's like, yeah, it's got like, it's very reminiscent of like the early J Tree stuff, like Raina Maria or something. I get to listen to it, both of them a few times. Yeah. I think the other one's really good too, but I don't know if his voice is like, it's
crazy.
It's pretty crazy. I need to spend a little bit more time with that one. I'll get back to you on it.
Cool.